Hello and welcome. My name is Shelby Dumaine, and this is a live show. We are here in the studio right now for the first in a three-part series on conscious leadership. In the studio today, we have David Reid and Dr. Liz Sweigart. They've put together a really incredible, really compelling presentation to help reach out to professionals in the space in Houston and make a real change, make a real impact in this, in the world around us. And like I mentioned, we are live right now. Also, here in the studio, we do have a live audience who will be asking some questions. But we also wanted to give you watching this at home the opportunity to ask your questions as well. So at any point in the presentation, if you have a comment, if you'd like to answer one of maybe David or Dr. Liz's questions, comment that. If you have a question for David or Dr. Liz, comment that as well. We're here in the chat to engage with you and to answer your questions and make you part of this show. So without further ado, I want to pass it over to David and Dr. Liz and start off with maybe, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
No, but thanks for asking. No, thanks, Shelby. Yeah, I'm David Reid. I am the CTO and CMO at NOV, but also the founder of redM. And I take a lot of joy out of developing leaders. And so I got with Dr. Liz here, and we talked about this and decided to put a class together. And so we have done the first of the classes, and we have another 2 to go. And so we thought this would be a great catch-up way for people to learn what we talked about. Dr. Liz, who are you?
Well, I'm Dr. Liz, apparently.
I knew it. You didn't know that.
I did not. I'm Liz Sweigart. I am the Chief Product and Strategy Officer for Safe Kids AI, on a mission to empower young people to be safer online by helping them make better decisions. My business background is quite varied. I've been in finance, operations, tax for the last 20 years, and my academic interest in this is that I have a PhD in organizational leadership psychology. And like you, I am passionate about helping people to flourish, and doing so by supporting them in becoming the leaders that they can be.
Right, and we're going to call you Dr. Liz because I am not Dr. David, and that's probably the best way of describing that.
Professor.
Professor, that'll sure, whatever. So we're going to go through the class, kind of the things that we talked about. And so conscious leadership is the name of the class, and it's an interesting subject. So why we're here, basically we have the 3 parts. We're going to start with self and the importance of self and how that in leadership is kind of a critical beginning. And then your circle, the people that you are around, and how that interacts with your leadership. And then finally, your community and how you kind of impact that. That's basically the plan. So what you're going to learn, I'm going to read it off the slide, identifying conscious leadership, knowing what that is. That's what you're going to get out of the class. Also describing where you are in the journey, which sounds easy, but that's actually the hard work, is working out where am I, how am I doing? And then having a growth plan for yourself. Those are the things we're going to be producing within the class. So we'll start with taking advantage of our studio audience. Sounds ominous, but we have a couple of people we asked earlier. When we ran the class before, we asked generally people to go spend time talking about this and coming up with examples of what they think conscious leadership is or what it looks like. And so we will start with a random Scotsman from the crowd, it looks like.
Hey, David, it's Jason here. The example I would have was Nelson Mandela, someone that really fought for what he believed in. Someone clearly made a huge impact to South Africa, Africa, a whole in the world on apartheid. Thought about himself, but his people, and also just thinking about the levels you showed there of how he impacted and used his EQ. Yes, there's a political agenda there, and maybe not everyone likes it, but what he went after and how difficult it was and how he thought about how he turned up and brought the masses, again, not from South Africa, but from the world. I thought that was, for me, that was a great view, I think, of a conscious leader.
It's a good example.
That's a great example, and I think you absolutely nailed it on the key parts of conscious leadership. When we talk about conscious leadership, we're talking about an individual who is capable of taking their knowledge of themselves, understanding why they do what they do, how things make them feel, and are capable then of equating that and understanding it in the broader context of their situation.
Yeah,
So it's their self-awareness, it's their situational awareness, their really 360-degree view of the world around them, and their understanding of how other people are feeling in the situation, the emotional intelligence
Yeah.
that you talked about, and then recognizing the link between those two things and the community.
Yeah.
How can I use my knowledge of self? How can I use my awareness of the situation? How can I integrate these pieces to produce the change that I want to see in the world and make things better? And
like
so
that.
I love that example. Thank you.
Okay, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Peyton Montalongo. I'm part of the organizational development team. One person that came to mind for me was Brene Brown, professor, speaker, author, really encouraging others to think about vulnerability and leadership and how to work through all of that yourself, and doing that for students and also leaders. So,
Yeah, good example. Yeah, I love Brene.
Well, what I really like about that is the theme you hit on of empowerment. As a leader, oftentimes it may feel as if it's all on us to show the way and lead the way, and it's all about the leader.
Yeah.
And the second it becomes about the leader, it's no longer leadership.
Right.
Leadership is about the follower. It's not about the leader. And with your example of Brene Brown, her message of empowering others to look within and to see and develop the skills and the abilities that they have, that's incredibly powerful. And so, yes, leadership doesn't require an appointed or an elected position. Leadership is really a question of understanding how you can empower others to be their best selves.
Yeah, I really like the vulnerability side of Brene. And just, I think both examples, thanks Peyton and Jason, but both examples are impacting the world. And I think that's the thing that I love the most, because I think we all would like to think our lives are worth more than just living, you know, so I like that a lot. Okay, on the path, so the kind of three areas we're going to be in through this course is to be, you know, self-aware, so it's about self, but being aware of self, and then in your circle, becoming followable, I think is what I like to call it, is it's kind of on the journey of being followable, and then community impact, and so that's kind of what we heard there, that I'd like to make sure my life has more than just existing on this planet. So let's start with being self-aware. So one of the things I like to think about is a tree, obviously by the image here. And the way trees work is we often look at our lives and we look at others and leadership, and we see the fruits of the work that people do, and we say, I like that fruit. I would like, how do I get that fruit? That's what I want. And in our own lives, we often will produce bad fruit, and we'll be like, okay, now I need to hide that fruit. That's my job. So it's all about what is seen. But really the work with self is not in the fruit system. It's always in the root system. It's always in, you know, really who am I, and harder questions. I think most leadership is trained on the fruit side of just make sure it looks this way. And that's really not how you produce good fruit. It's always to do with the soil. It's to do with the roots, where you're planted, where you spend your time. So I kind of like that imagery when we talk about, you know, roots and fruits. And so we'll be going into the root system today. So over to you on self mindset. What does that mean?
So when we think about leadership of self, which is an incredibly important dimension to leadership, again, we can't hope to help lead others if we can't first lead ourselves.
True.
And it begins with our mindset. It begins with how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world around us. And as we'll talk about, there are different aspects of this. Are we closed-minded? Are we open-minded? Are we looking to grow? Or do we have a picture of this is how the world works, this is how it is, and it can't be any different?
Yeah.
Our ability as leaders to understand our mindset, understand how it changes over time, that is a key part of us being able to lead ourselves, such that then, in the second part of the series, we can talk more about leading others.
Yeah, and I think mindset isn't natural for us to think about because we are us, right? We're stuck in our behaviors and our thinking. And particularly if you're already leaning towards a form of leadership, you're always getting these messages that it's okay, like I'm doing okay, or you start to think, well, maybe I'm a leader, maybe I can do things, and you get so excited about it, you don't want to know, is there something wrong in my mindset or my thinking? You just think it's working. So it kind of is a trap of leadership to not step back and look at mindset.
Again, going back to the idea of self-awareness, mindfulness, and really cultivating this sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
All of those pieces come together, and that's what puts us in the place where we can really start to grow and develop as leaders.
Cool. So I'm going to talk a bit about something I've said in many leadership classes. I usually open with this. I kind of didn't talk about it for a long time, but then people kept bringing it back. I remember the time you said this, so I kind of added it in because it seemed to impact people. And so the main theory is there's one problem and one solution, because people think I have lots of problems. I've got to, there's this and that. There's all these issues that I have to deal with. And so at the end of the day, I always think it boils down to one problem, one solution. And so the problem is actually ourselves, which people don't like to hear, but really it's the only thing that we can control is ourself. The everything that's out there, we can't control that, but there's enough work, I think, for our lifetime on ourselves. And so when we think, well, someone has done something wrong, or something isn't working, or I don't like something, we get caught in thinking about that and externalizing it, as opposed to how am I responding to that? And really that's all you can control, is what are you doing with that? And then the solution is communication, which it's I think everyone thinks you're going to say the solution is yourself again, which it is sort of, but it's really this communication thing that it seems really mysterious to people. It seems obvious, but mysterious in that actually getting to learn to communicate. We think we're good at it. We're pretty sure that we've been doing all right all these years, but that's where a ton of work is in being able to communicate to others and listening to others and understanding where they are, which leads to your favorite subject.
Asking powerful questions.
So tell us about asking powerful questions.
Well, I love this about the work that we've done together. I let you have the tree and you let me have the questions. When we ask questions, we shift our mindset.
Yeah.
When we tell people how it is or how it's going to be, we are projecting one view, and we're closing off ourselves and others to alternatives, possibilities. When we ask questions and we put ourselves in that inquisitive place, then we actually open up our thinking. We give ourselves a degree of permission.
Yeah.
It's also, though, how we phrase those questions and how we ask those questions. So a question may be powerful, but what we know makes a question powerful is how we phrase it. So, for example, why are you doing that? That may not
Seriously?
that may not be a helpful question.
I was going to get a cup of tea.
I know.
That's what I was
Well, there
gonna
you
do.
go. It's very judgy, right? So, yes, I
thought
asked a
judged.
question, but it's not particularly powerful.
It's very Scottish, though. I like
It is. You know how I roll. When you change your mindset about the question, how you make it powerful,
Yeah.
tell me what about that interests you?
I just like tea.
What about tea is exciting to you?
Yeah.
When you open up the question,
Changes everything.
it changes everything.
I like it. All right. So growth versus fixed, or growth over fixed mentality. Explain that for us.
Growth versus fixed. So one of the most important things we can do is we can shift our mindset from being fixed, believing how much knowledge I have now is all the knowledge I'm going to have. The skills I have now are all the skills I'm going to have. How this situation is right now, it is how it's going to be forever.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was having a conversation earlier this week with a C-suite executive of a company.
It wasn't me, right?
It was definitely not you. And the challenge that they were facing is that they were in a situation that felt like a crisis. It felt like this was going to be this way forever. They couldn't remember a time when it wasn't this way. This is a really big deal. And the powerful question was, what about this situation feels like a crisis? and stepping back and going, well, these areas, but frankly, I've experienced this before.
Yeah.
I've moved past it before.
That's great.
And changing your mindset to realize, oh, just because how it feels right now, and we'll talk about mental distortions and catastrophizing later, but we get ourselves
I
into
just like the word catastrophizing. I don't know what it means, but it
you,
sounds
you
great.
probably also like doing it.
Probably. Maybe.
So when we think about it, we get ourselves into a place where we are immovable.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we are the obstacle.
Yeah.
It's our thinking. When we move into a growth mindset, we are looking for possibilities. We're looking for alternatives. We are explorers. It is becoming an explorer in your life.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's the reasons why you don't do that is part of this journey we want people to go through. But I mean, in our normal worlds, we just can't imagine another way. And that's where it has those powerful questions and having, other people in your life, which is our next subject. But I think the thinking about, these things and starting to step back from situations, I think it's really healthy and helpful. So I'm going to kind of give well, I think we have a question. Can you bring up the person who's got a
Yes,
question?
it's actually an online question.
Okay.
This one came from Allison on LinkedIn, and she was wondering, could you give an example in your career where a powerful question helped a situation?
I'm ready to go with
You're
that.
always ready to go. I'm like, huh.
Born ready.
Go on, go for it.
One, Allison, thank you. I love this question. When I was a young manager, I really thought that I had to do everything. Not only did I have to do my job really well, but I was responsible for the people below me. And so if they weren't doing what I wanted to see, then I kind of needed to do their stuff too. I took on so much responsibility. I took so much onto myself that I left very little room for other people to grow. And the powerful question that helped me came from a partner that I was working for. And they said to me, Liz, what are you responsible for here? And it wasn't a binary question, right? It's not a yes or no. It invited me into a space where I could think and where I could kind of cast around a bit. And as I got perspective, which was the gift of that question, what I realized was, oh, the things I'm responsible for are a lot fewer than what I think I am supposed to be doing. And because of that, I was actually getting in the way of other people getting a chance to grow, other people getting a chance to develop. I wasn't actually being a leader. I was just being a hardcore doer. But that shifted my perspective because it wasn't, this is not your responsibility.
That's good.
It invited me to make that decision. And because of that, I was more likely to change my behavior and sustain that behavioral change.
Yeah, that gave me time to think of one too, which I appreciate. I had an event. I present a lot in public, and I kind of involved my team. I had a lot of control issues in that space, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna let my team manage kind of the presentation part of this, which I'm usually hyper paranoid on. And it was an event that was very timed. People were walking by, and we set them up in chairs, and I was ready to speak, and the presentation didn't work, and it was critical for what I was going to talk on. So my stressed self just didn't even know how to deal with it with the crowd. I went in the back and tried to work out what was wrong, and there was no backup, there was no plan and I was like, everything that I would normally do didn't happen, and I was so upset. I didn't say too much. I just took the day as it was. It really was a bad moment. I kind of wandered on into the night and just it kept stewing. I'm like, I'm so upset. I want them to know how it felt for me. And I got up in the morning, and two of the individuals who were responsible were at breakfast. Like, I was walking towards them, and I thought, I need to make this a proper learning moment instead of a control moment. I needed one of them to feel, and I'd done this before where you help people feel, this is how it feels for me. Are you feeling it? And you want to know that they feel it. And but the mistake was assuming that people that they were okay with it. That was my assumption, was that somehow in life they thought this was okay. So I sat down, and it was a great moment for me because it relieved me going forward with, I can do this better. And I said, how was your night? Knowing that mine wasn't good. and they both said it was horrible. Like I couldn't sleep. And I said, yeah, that's a tough feeling. Like I understand that feeling. I said, that'll help you remembering, as you go to do things, that'll be really helpful. Don't let it be just negative. And it was good for me. It was a much more powerful question, even though it was simple. But I kind of released control quite some in that space. Did I pass the test?
Flying colors. But I think what is interesting, what came out of both of our experiences are two of the most powerful question words. Yours was how, mine was what.
Right.
And we try to steer clear again of why.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Right.
And we'll get into more of why may not be the right way to go as we continue.
Is that wrong? Because why is never mind. So this is an image I have. My couple will be architectural in nature because I started with building buildings, learned a lot about humanity in the middle of it. But I think this is a human behavior thing I've recognized, particularly through hard times, which we've been through some hard times. And I realized that most people feel really powerful in certain situations. And so one of the situations I realized, if I said to people, okay, for the crowd, if you can imagine, or online, if I said, we need to break a window, or one of those shows where you have to clean out your kitchen, here's the sledgehammer. Like nobody goes, not sure I know how to do this. Like everyone's like, yes, give me the sledgehammer. I'm all after it. And we just tear it up. It's a great, powerful feeling. The alternative would be, here's the materials to build a kitchen. Now try that. And you'd be like, oh yeah, some will go great. I can do that. But most would be no. And I think that is a human condition that I've recognized, that everybody has the gift of tearing down, including ourselves. But the idea of building, well, that's much harder. And so that's actually work. And so when people tell me something's wrong, I'm like, congratulations, you are human. Well done, you've qualified. So, but now people who come with like, I've got a solution, I've got ideas, man, that takes work. That takes thinking. That takes changing your thinking.
It does. And I love this image for a couple of reasons. One, it makes me think of Maslow's dictum that when
too.
you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about self-awareness and leadership, our tendency to get really myopic. Again, human beings don't really like complexity.
Yeah.
We like having the smallest number of items to choose between because it makes our decision making easier. And so when I look at this image, I think of the opportunity it gives us to build self-awareness is how we're looking at something really the only way to look at it? Or is it just that it's our tendency because that's how we've been trained, or that's simply our preference?
Nice.
And the other thing I like about this image as we think about self-awareness and mindset has to do with how we respond to potentially powerful questions from others.
Yeah.
Does a challenge or a question of something we've said or done feel to us like someone is taking a sledgehammer to us? Is it
Yes.
an attack?
Every time.
Well, and that as you explore that, David, that
Yes,
might help you
tell
to
me, doctor.
understand. Not that kind of a doctor. It might help you though,
For our show, you're Dr. Liz.
as you reflect. It may help you to think of, wow, in my defensiveness, right? Because that's a stress response, and so the neurotransmitter is called cortisol, and that is fight or flight.
Right.
And so when you feel attacked, that inhibits your ability to think rationally and make good decisions.
That's good. That's
And
good.
so how do you take these challenges to what you may perceive to be my authority as a leader?
Right.
Is it an attack, or is it an opportunity to build on an idea? Is it something you can use to be generative, not destructive or reductive?
I love it.
And that's something that it takes self-awareness to overcome. You have to realize in the moment, because it doesn't help 3 hours later.
Right.
You have to train yourself in the moment to recognize, ooh, I'm having a stress response to this because it feels uncomfortable. And I have the awareness, but I also have the ability to self-regulate such that I can calm myself down. And I can open myself up to what might be here. Now, that doesn't mean that the person is necessarily making the inquiry in a tactful manner.
Right.
And maybe that's an opportunity where you can help them to grow and develop. But you don't have to take every potential question or challenge as an attack or an affront. How you respond to that is up to you. And that's a huge part of building your self-awareness as a leader.
I feel better already. Thank you.
Take 2 powerful questions and call me in the morning.
That's a good line. I think we should say it more.
I practiced it for
Okay,
this.
good. All right, so here's another one. This is in architectural principles. I love how this relates. I think a lot of architectural stuff that I was taught has a parallel, that you can use in leadership. And so this one's one of my favorites. So when you're designing space, which is what we move around and live in, and you're going to put objects around, there's kind of two environments that you can create. You can create a positive space, which would be like this room. It's a closed off space, or you can have an open space, so where you create objects, but it's out and open, and so there's a level of moving through that happens in that space. And so the way it's taught is people move through negative space and dwell in positive space. And so that is a fundamental, I believe, of humanity, is that most people, you can find people who have been through a negative experience. I think probably the hardest thing is losing someone. If you lose someone, they're not losing them at the mall, but someone actually dies, and you go through this. And I noticed it in my own family with my mother. She got wrapped up when losing her parents, and she really struggled with moving on from that. And that would be doing something that isn't good for humanity. In fact, when you go through something dark or difficult, you can choose to live there all the time, or you can live in a positive space. And I love this idea that when negative things come, some people live in the let's pretend it didn't happen, which I don't think is healthy. But I think the ability to go through and experience things, we did it with a downturn, we've done it with COVID, but that ability to actually move through and not hold on to the dark things, but actually live in a positive space. So choosing to put yourself in a mental space where you're very positive.
I like that. And I also think it gives you an opportunity to practice kindness with yourself.
Yeah.
And give yourself a measure of grace.
Right.
We live in a world that is dominated with toxic positivity, where good vibes only are permitted. And where everyone is all too eager to tell us to just cheer up and look on the bright side.
Cheer up and shut up. That's what I say.
I know. We're working on that.
Oh, thanks, doctor.
And so what we want to do, though, is we want to, and you said it with COVID, right? We've all experienced loss.
Yeah.
It may not have been death, but we have all had to grieve over the last 2 years as things that we wanted or hoped for did not come to pass.
That's a great way of looking at it.
And as we move through these spaces, we don't have to tell ourselves that they didn't happen.
Right.
Or that our feelings about them aren't legitimate. Our feelings are our feelings.
Right.
Where we choose to dwell in those feelings, how we choose to manage those, that has to do with our self-awareness of what are we feeling, and being real with ourselves about what we're feeling, not just telling ourselves, oh, I feel great, everything is fine. And again, we live in a culture that bombards us, whether it's social media or whatever.
Right.
It bombards us with pictures of other people's outsides that we are relentlessly comparing to our insides.
Yeah.
And those are apples and oranges.
That's great. Good. So this is also your area. What is that? Curious over confirming.
Going back to mindset again, and going back as well to the kind of questions we were asking about, why did you do that?
Right.
Which you still don't have a good answer to.
I don't know.
No, it's really disappointing, David. I'd hoped you'd be more
That's my
prepared.
thing. Very disappointing is my style.
Others
kidding.
try, you succeed.
Thank you.
So when we think about mindset and we think about curious versus confirming, it has to do with how do you move through life and how do you engage with situations? How do you engage with others? Are you curious? Do you want to understand why?
Yeah.
Or are you simply looking to confirm that which you already believe?
You know where I see this that I like? Because as I traveled the world, that was where curiosity became really important. Watching people who go into other cultures, and it becomes really obvious, and they just carry their culture and wonder why other people aren't doing it the way they're doing it, and don't have that, you know, because I loved going to other countries and asking, you know, well, why do you do that? Especially if there were, you know, things that just really didn't make sense. Or I mean, I loved going to China, particularly because I'd heard so many things about it, and everything I saw wasn't exactly the way that I had thought it would be. So I love that idea. We do have a question.
Yep.
Let
Got
us hear.
that's right. We've got another online question from LinkedIn. Do you all have any advice on how to encourage others not to stick in the negative or dark spaces?
Powerful questions.
Powerful question.
Powerful questions are an incredible disruptor. And I want to point a difference between interruption and disruption. If you're simply interrupted doing something, your intention hasn't changed.
Right.
As soon as the interruption is resolved, you're going right back to where you were. Disruption is different. Disruption means that the ultimate destination is now different.
Right.
You can think of it as an interruption in your travel plans versus a disruption in your travel plans. An interruption, we're just late getting to our destination. Disruption, we've been diverted to a different city.
Right.
So as we think about how do we encourage people to find alternative ways of considering their situation such that they're not becoming trapped in a spiral of a fixed mindset, really? How do we help them grow? Powerful questions can do that. What are some alternatives? What are some possibilities? What do you see as the best that could happen in the future? Right. How is what you're learning now going to help you achieve what you want to do next? Questions that get you out of that space.
I do think it's because there's and we've had this conversation about where we're not going when we're going to be doing this class, which is we're not going to do therapy. But there is a level of some people carry negativity back to kind of the limbic system that you kind of referred to earlier, that there are things in people's lives that lead them towards that level. How do you help people? Actually, I get to ask you. It's easier for me to ask the question. But how do you help people get from that? You know, someone's got a rut that they can't get out of in thinking. Is that what is a good, powerful question? Because, like, I don't know how you get people to really do that, because I often find that's a challenge. As I get to people, we can discuss things, and there's a line you shouldn't cross with people or without being invited.
Yes to all of that.
Yeah.
So the first thing, though, is I would kind of take one of the powerful questions that was used on me and turn it back to you. In those situations, what is your responsibility?
Right.
And what assumptions are you making?
That's good.
And frequently as leaders, one, we assume that fixing everybody is our responsibility.
Right.
And we also make assumptions that, one, we have all the tools, we have all the techniques, we have all the knowledge that's needed
good.
to address
That's
it,
really good.
and that they want us to do it in the first place.
Right.
The number of times that I've had to say to people who've just burst into my office with a problem, go, okay, I will make the time. Do you need me to fix this, or do you just need me to listen? And about 85% of the time, they just need me to listen.
Good.
But if I don't do that, my initial reaction is to go into problem-solving mode because I am a fixer. And often I don't have the tools, the capability to fix.
That's really good, particularly when it's something deeper with someone. It's leading them to. There's probably I'm not qualified is a great statement for some of those
Yes.
things. You know.
And you can still be empathetic.
Right.
You can still hear them.
Right.
And another powerful question to ask yourself and to help them ask themselves, what am I not tapping into? What's available to me that I'm not thinking of? What am I missing?
Right.
Because the answer, as you said, they may very well be some form of, say, therapy.
Yeah.
which, again, neither of us is in a position to provide.
Yeah.
And we can help to steer them in a direction that maybe makes that seem a little bit more possible.
Yeah.
And again, it's all about moving from this mindset of, I'm curious about what's going on with them. What are we not thinking about? What are our responsibilities here? Away from, you have a problem. Is it caused by this? Okay, no, next place in the decision tree.
Yeah.
If your interactions with people are decision tree based,
Yeah.
you're likely a more, in social sciences research, we think about it in terms of quantitative research versus qualitative research.
Yeah.
In quantitative, you go in with a hypothesis and you look to the data to prove or disprove your hypothesis.
Right.
Qualitative, you go in and you look to the data to give you the answer. It's not confirming what you already think.
It's like you're curious almost.
You
rather
are
than
curious
confirming.
throughout. And here's the thing, there's a place for both. It's not that one is always better than the other. And it's not like I live in a curious mindset 24/7, as
Right.
much as I wish I did.
Right.
But it's recognizing time and place, understanding how to switch myself between them,
Yeah.
and also being sure that I'm not bringing that and putting that onto somebody when it's not appropriate, because
Yeah.
then it's not helpful to them. And it just frustrates me because they're not doing what I told them to do to fix it.
Right. And I like the premise as well of that. I mean, we're not here saying we know everything, here it is. It's really that it's this journey we want people to be on of, learning and asking questions and that's kind of the idea of conscious leadership, the group that we've developed, is so that people can actually get in discussion with each other and do some learning. So we have another question from the studio audience. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm redM Johnson. I'm a VP of Strategic Accounts and Sales for Wellbore for NOV. Thanks for having me. With this thought process of curious versus confirming, sometimes people will find themselves in a confirming space because they tend to surround themselves with people who have the same thought process,
good.
or just culturally they were brought up that way, or their family has raised them to be a certain way and that's what they see as being right. How do you have an open, non-judgmental type of conversation with somebody to try to lend them towards this curious space so that you can have a more open dialogue and have them kind of explore a curious space and you join that journey with them as well?
I mean, often for me, it's in the observation, if you can get people into self-observation, that's usually what helps me, is to kind of have a conversation about, asking where, I'm trying to think of some specifics, but the journey of people to think about I'm thinking about how people hire, which is something I observe all the time, where people are hiring people out themselves. And so getting them into the conversation of, it does seem like everyone is very similar. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about variance? Or sometimes giving them experiences is something I've worked into, is like, let's create an experience where someone tries something else that they haven't been used to, so that they can start to realize, oh, I do have an issue. Most people think they don't have an issue. But the fruits and who you have working for you kind of speaks for itself. And that's a leadership thing too, where people need to learn that they're looking for just confirmation all the time. And so getting them into that, what's possible without that conversation is really good. It's getting people to the openness, because everyone believes it's not their problem. Everyone believes I don't have that problem. And so getting them to a point where they can recognize, well, maybe there is something there, and getting that to work.
So I really appreciate that question, because it really reminds me of the role that we have as leaders to model behavior.
That's right.
So there's two really profound ways that human beings learn. We learn by doing, so direct experience, like my 4-year-old touching the waffle iron. It's hot, like the sun. Well, let me tell you about her younger sister, 2 years younger, standing on the stool in the kitchen next to her. Guess what she didn't do? She did not touch the waffle iron. Two profound ways human beings learn: direct experience and something called social learning. Social learning is observation, whether it is observation because we read about someone's experience, hear about it, see it in a movie, or observe it in real life. When we have someone who is in a very confirming mindset, regardless of what's generated that, a powerful tool we have to help break them out of that is to model what a curious mindset looks like. Because again, human beings are gifted when it comes to observation and mimicry. And we see it all the time. If you have ever seen a trend take hold, we see somebody else doing something, it intrigues us, and we want to go and copy that thing. And so as a leader, when you have an opportunity to model a curious mindset, you may not in that moment fix that person. You may not radically change their approach, but you begin to show them a different way. And by re-emphasizing that over time, that's how they can learn and change themselves. Because lasting change doesn't come from what somebody else tells you to do. It is from your ability to internalize that and then make that part of your behavior.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen experience where people, you put them in a situation to experience something different. And, it's interesting, the human behavior, because they also don't remember what they were before. They don't remember that they were actually having an issue. They just go, yeah, of course, everyone knows that. It's an interesting thing, but that experience makes it very normal very quickly. Jason, I see you're back.
Yeah, just building on that question, something you said, David, of curious. We clearly are in an industry, it's very global, and as the connectivity starts, it's not just the CEOs or CXOs that are making global and plant managers, et cetera, it's everyone. One thing I was thinking about on conscious leadership, it's one thing to be curious about China, et cetera, and you and I have spoken about Russia, Asia, but how do we embed awareness of culture and conscious leadership with our up-and-coming leaders, et cetera? Because for me, that's even more important in our industry. I don't know if you're going to get to the next level. If it is, I'll shut up and wait. But for me, that's just a fantastic one. As well, shut up and wait.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's an East Scottish thing. It's okay.
We've got this shut up problem, but go on.
But I think that's a huge, there's either a British or American, I feel, a way of, well, I work for IBM or NOV, this is the way the culture, and we go to India or Nigeria, and it's very much, I'm going to ask you this question, I'm going to confirm, and we kind of almost have to realize the culture we're going into and what... Yeah. Thailand, you're really not going to get a lot of feedback. So how do you use your leadership skills? I'd just be interested in what Dr. Liz, I guess, where's your view of?
So I think we have to step back for a second and think about culture first. What is culture? Culture comes about because one of the things that human beings really love are stories, and we love myths, and we create stories, and then groups of us will share stories. And the more fervently we believe in those stories, the tighter we cling to them, the stronger the culture that grows among us. And what we also tend to do, and we'll talk about mental distortions, as I said earlier, we'll talk about that even more later. We tend to overgeneralize. We tend to pick one piece of data, one piece of information, and that is everything. And we build an entire worldview around it that then becomes fixed. And we look to confirm that because that's how it is. So what I would say is that when we think about culture and we think about helping people to understand cultural differences, one, we have to get off this idea of culture as a monolith. It's not. And we have to become aware of what our own cultural mores are, mores and mooring points. What is it that we believe and informs our worldview as to this is how it is and how it all works? And then move to a space of being curious about others who don't see it the same way and not viewing their approach as an attack on our own. So I think as we build up the next generation of leaders, it does come down to what we're talking about now, which is self-awareness, understanding the culture you come from, understanding how you interact with the culture of others, understanding your own reactions to challenges, to things that are long-held beliefs that you have. And then what we will get to in part 2 is your situational awareness, your circle, and how you understand and relate to those around you and the world around you. Because you've got to get those two pieces together. Because if you're only aware of yourself, you will be glaringly lacking in emotional intelligence.
So I'm going to come back for number 2 then. I think that's what she just told me.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
and
everyone should.
three. You really,
And
you need
three,
all.
sorry.
Three's the
Yeah,
big
for a
deal.
limited time, collect all 3.
Yeah. I do. I have a story of just recently. Someone I work with told me a story of how they had been born in another country, came to the States, and they started talking about their religion. They were Sikh, and they said they've been in the States trying to hide and suppress their Indian background, and didn't even know they were doing it. And in a more open environment, people were curious. She became more curious about telling the story, and felt this like release, like I didn't even know I was suppressing my culture because I felt like it wasn't welcome. And it is really interesting how if you continue down that path of, curiosity, and it's really safety, where people feel like I can discover who I am and be who I am. I think that's a really powerful thing.
And the powerful question she asked herself, maybe without even knowing it, what assumptions am I making?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this isn't welcome. And then that affects her behavior, her mindset, and frankly, ultimately, how she feels.
Yeah, it's good. Situational awareness. So, ask great questions. Who said that? Oh, that was you.
Wow, I
Genius.
said powerful. You're the one who wanted
I
great.
did. You're right.
but
I put great
You
in.
really, you were
I
looking.
never fixed
you were
it.
looking for me to confirm
Oh, that's
that
right.
your
They're
that your
great.
questions are great.
Yeah,
They're great, David.
Are they powerful or are they? I don't know. So this is listening to understand and not planning your response. The how you engage with people and how your brain works. We have this rapid trying to think of what the answer is for someone talking to you, and you're not listening at the end of the day, and that active listening becomes a critical part of your self-awareness,
Yes, and this is the preview for what's up next.
which is what's up next.
Which
wanna
is
see?
how do you take your awareness of self and then begin to translate that into your awareness of others and the situation around you. And as we continue with the theme we've had on mindset, affirming versus judging, and
Yeah.
we've touched on this already today.
Yeah.
But are we looking to affirm someone? Are we looking to let other folks know, like, it's okay to not be perfect?
Yeah.
Everybody gets
Or
distracted sometimes.
What is perfect? That's
Yeah,
the question
it's
my
not a
assessment.
thing, is what it is.
Right.
Or are our questions judging oriented? And so
Right.
this is where the whole question of why comes
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
When we affirm something, what about this thing is so interesting to you? When I talk to people about things that they do, I was once trapped next to somebody at a cocktail party who had a PhD in shark parasites.
Ah, right. As one does.
Oh, as one definitely did. And my natural inclination was to be like, why did you go get a PhD in shark parasites? That would be the bottom half of this one.
Yes.
That's hardcore judging.
Yeah.
Rather than one, opening myself up to be curious,
Yeah.
opening myself up to learn and grow. So an affirming way to approach that is to say, tell me what about shark parasites so captivated you that you pursued this study?
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, he blossomed like a June flower.
Yeah.
And
I don't know
again,
what a June flower is. But
like somebody who was just really passionate about this area and frankly contributing new knowledge to human understanding that not my thing,
Yeah.
but also not my place to decide that it shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference between something being a thing and something being my thing.
Right.
And again, as leaders, when we are working with people,
Yeah.
our instinct to switch to, why did you do that?
Right.
As opposed to, what about that seemed like a good idea at the time?
Yeah.
And you can do it in a way that's not overly sarcastic or judgmental, but thinking about how
Don't know
do
if
you...
I could, but I'll try.
It may be the Scottish thing.
It's the Scottish thing. It's a whole nother therapy.
We're doing a whole different Scottish leadership
Yeah,
session.
Yeah, it's a different one.
How do you switch that? And how do you get to a place where you are coming from a more affirming, and going back to what you said earlier, positive?
Yeah.
How do you get to a place where you're looking to affirm, support people, and get away from this very dark place of judgment?
Okay, so I'm gonna take it to a whole nother level of judgment. This is my failure is not a style slide, and there is a very cute faceless baby that they don't exist. That'd be kind of scary. This is a. I started to realize that in my judgy brain, that I would look at everyone and there'd be people who would kept failing, and I thought, there it is. There's that style called failure. And I realized that the source of that was that I believed myself that I was a failure. As things would continue to fail, I'd be like, wow, that's my style. Failure is my style. And I had to get myself to a different place of thinking. And it really began with my daughter. We're in Scotland. She's newly born, and babies are amazing. You just look at them and they're just the most wonderful thing in the world. And so my daughter, she starts to get up and she's about to walk, and you're thinking, I don't know why that is the most amazing thing in the world, but watching a child get up and kind of look a little bit like they've been drinking, which they haven't. I know you were thinking, have they? No, they haven't. But she's kind of moving you like you're so excited for this child that's walking. It's like the most amazing thing. And then she fell over, and I'm like, you stupid baby. This baby's broken. I need another bit. Who made this? It's like, no, you don't say, you stupid baby. It's not the natural thing, but that is what we say to ourselves, is we don't have that concept that learning is a process. And we do it with people, and it's really that judging story of when people are learning, we want to point out that it isn't working, or you are a failure. That thought that someone is a failure, like when you put them in a box of, well, them, they're a loser, however you want to say it. So I think that is a preset in judging ourselves that really doesn't help. We have a question.
We do, yes. This comes from Kamalpreet online on LinkedIn, actually. And she was wondering if you have any advice, kind of going along with talking about failure and taking that fear away for young leaders. And I wanted to expand, because this was a question I actually was thinking, so when she commented
me
it,
too.
I was like, perfect. But to especially young leaders, young professionals who maybe are feeling that imposter syndrome,
Wow.
that fear of failing,
Yeah.
and they're early in their career, what advice would you have for them?
That is what that is. It is. And it's good news, the imposter syndrome is always with you. It's okay. So that being kind to yourself is critical, and allowing yourself not to get it right. I had an employee who was working with someone who worked for them, and they were explaining this process they were going through, and she said, I realized they weren't getting it right, so I got them out of the way and did the IT thing, move, just started fixing it, and I was like, oh, that is the difference. It's that being interested in growth of people, including yourself, being very patient with ourselves. And when things don't go right, and saying, okay, this is really a way of understanding growth. And it's not easy, because we feel like, no, everything in you is saying, no, you need to take care of this. This is not right. I am completely not right in this place, this job. And time is a big healer of this thinking, and that's why it's hard for young leaders. Is when you start, you just have this, I knew I was going to be wrong, or I knew I was, for me, my limbic system, stupid is number one in my list. Like, I knew I was stupid because I grew up dyslexic, and so as I heard my siblings all doing well, I would be like, yeah, that's right, you're the one who doesn't. And so in my system, that's where I go to. And so everything, it seems to wrap around that thought. And so everyone kind of has that in their system, where there's something where it's confirming something that you think negatively about yourself, and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And so it's really learning to work out what's true. And that requires some vulnerability with people around you, which is part two. So we won't go there. But yeah, did you have something to add?
I think that's spot on. It's giving yourself grace. It's giving grace to others.
Right.
It's recognizing that absent failure, there's no opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And I think particularly for young leaders, something I have said many years is the first time you do something hard shouldn't be the first time you do something hard. And people would look at me and think, well, how's that possible? I said, what you do is you find yourself a real low stakes environment.
That's really good.
And there are very few environments that are lower stakes than, frankly, the four walls of my office.
Right.
So get up and try it. And fail in every direction you possibly can, because
Yeah.
this is your chance to learn with really no dire or long-term consequence. And so as an emerging leader, finding those opportunities, those safe people where you can be vulnerable, where you can try
Right.
and practice, that's how you're going to gain the personal mastery. But again, what we see, whether it's online, in media, wherever, all we ever see is the final performance. We never see the dress rehearsal.
That's good.
And it's a question of finding those people in those places to do it and then giving that to others.
Wow.
And
like
so
it.
that as a young leader, getting in your reps in what feels to you like a safe environment,
Yeah.
that's the key.
And for leaders of others also, or later down the road is when we're going to talk to that. But I do think, I know in leading others, it's putting people in a situation where the downside isn't a big deal. Or even if it is a fairly big deal, that response of grace in most situations is probably the right one, because this isn't a style, this is a journey of growth.
The quotation is horribly misattributed to Winston Churchill, but the idea that failure isn't final, it's not fatal. It is how you rebound, it's your resilience.
There you go.
It's your will to persist that's what really matters. And we so often think that failure is the last stop.
Right.
It's actually the first stop.
It's good. Okay, so we're pretty much wrapping up, but what we did with the class, and we'll leave for those online, anybody who wants to join in class 2, which we'll do at the ION, I'm not sure exactly when, June, July?
July.
August? July, August, July? Good.
July.
There you go. So we're going to be doing a larger class there, so we can expand. So that's part of this, so people can catch up. But we gave people some things to do. We gave out workbooks in the class, so you don't have to have a conscious leadership workbook. But if you can take a notebook and do a bit of this homework. One is to look up mental distortions. We talked a little bit, referred to them, and see which ones fit you. What ways do you have of thinking that are probably not right? At first you'll go, yeah, that's just true. This is who I am. But going through that, do you want to give a couple of examples for us?
Sure. So filtering, I'm going to filter out all the good things and I'm going to focus on the 2 or 3 awful, awful things. I'm going to grow them massively out of proportion. And then that is the only reality I will see, and I am stuck there.
That's good.
Overgeneralization, another personal favorite.
Mine too.
I'm going to take one data point and it suddenly becomes the entire population.
Yeah.
And catastrophizing. This one thing went sideways, therefore everything is going sideways.
Right.
The sky is falling, and the collapse of all humanity is imminent.
Right.
We get ourselves into these spaces where our
great.
brains tell us things that aren't true, but we feel like it is.
That's awesome. Okay, so do some
Well,
homework.
it's not awesome, but
No, I
I
mean,
do
it's
agree
not
they're good
awesome.
examples. Yes.
They're great examples.
But yeah.
They're terrible things.
Yes.
Just to be clear, if you wrote in the
Definitely,
notebook,
yeah.
that's awesome, it's not. So here's a kind of something to think about yourself in your notebooks. And I would ask others, but ask yourself first. Do I express in positive and encouraging terms? Do I do that? Your self answer would be great, because future asking others whether you do that will be more of a surprise. And then being empathetic, actually connecting. Am I empathetic is a good question of yourself. And am I finding value in others? And I think that's something, particularly in teamwork, that you can learn to do. But finding value in others also will reflect back on, are you finding value in yourself? Which the alternative is, if you're judging people a lot, you're going to find the person you judge the most is yourself.
And maybe one way to go back to our powerful questioning
Great questions.
is great questions. There you go. We can move them from great to powerful.
There you go. That's a book.
We're not asking, am I doing this?
Yeah.
How am I doing this?
There you go.
Because otherwise you've set yourself up for a yes, no. It's one or the other.
That's good.
And very little in our lives are actually yes or no.
Right.
There's a lot more space in the middle. And so
nice.
start by giving yourself space in the middle.
That's great. Okay, and then my favorite thing that is really your thing, but I just like that it spells the word whoop.
You really do.
Which
You really do.
whoop, which why outcome obstacles plan. I don't know why they do.
Well, the technical psychology term for it is a mental contrasting with implementation
I was going to say that. I
intent.
didn't want to shame you.
I know, it's terrible. But when we think about, again, when we think about our mindset and we think about opening up our mindset, we think about moving to more of a coaching mindset, coaching ourselves first,
Right.
and thinking about goal setting. So what's my why? What is it that I want? What do I want to achieve?
I don't know.
Some days I don't either.
Okay.
I go from there into, well, what would it look like and what would it feel like? How
Mm-hmm.
would I feel if I accomplished this? What would happen? And then the really important part, which goes back to something we talked about earlier, all the positive thinking in the world isn't going to get you there.
Right.
You have to confront the reality of your present situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are obstacles to getting from where you are to where you want to be, because if there weren't, you'd already be there.
Great.
So what are the obstacles? What do I have to overcome?
Mm-hmm.
And now that I understand that, what's my plan? How am I going to do it?
That's good.
And putting that together. And so as we go into the next section of this program, sitting down, each of us, and being able to say, what are some of my goals and how can I work through just this very simple rubric to come up with an approach for me to be able to kind of self-coach,
Right.
make myself more self-aware, and set myself up on a path to do this. And it also gives you an opportunity to use it with others.
I thought you were going to say use the word whoop, but okay.
It
Whoop.
gives you that
Okay,
opportunity.
I get very excited about it. So that's the homework. And so if you're watching, you want to get involved in the second class that we'll do, go find a couple of people and get a notebook and start talking through some of these things. And we will be getting back together in July.
Yep.
So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.